We'll be talking about three big-time 2023 football recruits on today's episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode going to be mainly based on Flyville 23 recruiting. The class is obviously off to a great start. Another big-time recruiting event is coming up this weekend. That is the 502 Barbecue. A lot of big-time 2023 and 24 prospects will be in the city of Louisville for the barbecue. A lot of current commitments like Pierce Clarkson, DeAndre Moore, and Aaron Williams, Jamari Johnson, Luke Burgess, so on down the list, Jaleel McClain. But we are going to be talking about three current Cardinals prospects and what they would bring to the table, respectively, to this program. So we will be discussing five-star defensive end Matayo Uiagalelei, four-star linebacker Leviticus Su'a, and four-star linebacker Stanquan Clark. So we will start out with the first one. The last name, obviously familiar here, five-star defensive end Matayo Uiagalelei, 6'5", 265-pound edge rusher from St. John Bosco. For many people, I mean, this last name is pretty noteworthy, with his brother being quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson, which the Cardinals faced last year in that tough loss at Cardinal Stadium. But if you are kind of a recruiting guru, you've been following a little bit, you know that Steve Clarkson, Pierce Clarkson's father, is close with Dave Uiagalelei, who is DJ and Matayo's father. Obviously, Louisville's momentum with the high school in terms of recruiting has been extremely noteworthy, considering that there are multiple players from that school that are currently committed to the program. A lot of those I just mentioned just a little while ago. But Matayo is one of those players at St. John Bosco, and obviously, getting a five-star commit in Ruben Owens was huge, but I don't think for many Louisville fans that's something that we're coming to expect. Although it is nice to see the uptick in recruiting. But overall, I don't have to. I don't have to really explain why this would be a monumental get for the university. I mean, a five-star edge rusher into the program. Anytime you can get a five-star is big, but getting a five-star edge rusher, it just makes it that much more crucial. In terms of his recruitment, it seems like, Clemson, where DJ is at, is a big-time player in his recruitment. Alabama, obviously. I think he recently went on a visit to Ohio State last month. He went to actually 3 visits last month: Ohio State, USC, and Oregon, all in consecutive weekends. Obviously, Alabama is in the mix, and Clemson as well. So I saw someone, I think it was one of the reporters for one of the schools, I forget which one it was, so forgive me on that, that basically said, I don't necessarily think Louisville's really going to crack into the top 3 or 5. I don't think that the interest is truly significant. I will say this, yes, it's not an official visit, but anytime you have a player going across the country to a school for an unofficial visit, for just a weekend barbecue, I mean, I think that's pretty significant, right? Anytime a player makes a visit on his own accord, it's a big time deal. I'm not saying that Louisville's going to be that they're going to find themselves in the top group in his recruitment, but I do think that the fact that Matayo is visiting this weekend serves two things. Number one, it shows that there's at least some interest. Now, how much interest that is, well, it's going to depend on, whether or not he schedules an official visit. I think you get 5 official visits. Matayo currently, I believe, has taken 3 of those so far. I'll have to be corrected on that. I'm really not overly sure. Yes, I think it's 3 overall. So, and then the second reason what I was talking about was, yes, you have you would assume that there is at least some significant interest. But number 2, and this might be a little bit more important, is the fact that he's from St. John Bosco. Dave, his father, and Pierce's father, Steve, are close friends, which what you would think would bode well with that relationship. It seems like Pierce and them are close. Obviously, having multiple teammates from his high school committed probably does a good job in trying to recruit their friend to come play with them. But overall, I think it's just huge to get him on campus. I'm not saying that Louisville's going to be on commitment watch or anything like that, but I think that that there's a possibility after this visit that he might schedule an official for the fall. That's yet to be seen. But as I was kind of alluding to before, we talked a little bit about his recruiting schedule and stuff like that. Is Matayo getting a high caliber defensive end is huge, because in the college ranks we've seen many scenarios to where dominant defensive linemen, especially on the edge, there might not necessarily be a more valuable player than an absolute all-around dominant defensive end and edge rusher, considering that it forces opposing offensive coordinators to completely, shift their game plan around that certain player. I think we're going to kind of see a little bit of that effect this season with Jermaine Lole kind of on the interior. But I kind of mentioned Josh Allen for Kentucky back in 2018 and how that defense as a whole might have had some weaknesses that weren't necessarily highlighted as much, because opposing offenses had to focus so much on Josh Allen that, hey, he was getting his, he was, making his production, but it also opened up so many more opportunities for other players in that defense to really make their mark as well. And I think that you get a dominant defensive end into the program. I mean, we're talking about a 5-star defensive end. It would be a monumental get for the program. He is currently ranked by the 24/7 Sports Composite as the 27th best prospect, the 4th best edge rusher, and the 3rd best prospect in the state of California. According to 24/7 Sports alone, he is the 8th best player. Still the 3rd best in California, but the 2nd best edge rusher. As I mentioned, a lot of schools after him. Chris Singletary, of the national recruiting expert at 24/7 Sports, back in February projected him as a first-round pick. He had this to say in his scouting report: impressive physical size for a junior, checking in at 6'5" and weighing in the 265-pound range. This guy has all the measurables you want. Long athletic build to go along with impressive arm length and wingspan. Puts him at an elite level with those traits. This top-notch edge has unique athleticism for someone his size. Possessing excellent agility, change of direction, bend, and power makes him one of the best players in the country. He is light on his feet and plays with very good power and technique on the edge and in the run game, with room to grow, or room to continue to develop and grow while improving. As a pass rusher, he does a good job using speed to power, as well as having a good dip and rip move, and always using active hands to prevent linemen from latching onto him. Singletary goes on to say he consistently gains ground on his rush without stopping his feet, displays a twitch out of his stance that translates to explosion once he makes contact with the blocker, along with a strong punch to control and disengage to defeat the blocker. Just kind of going on to paraphrase, he talks about redirection without hesitating. A two-way player, he plays tight end as well. So that athleticism is kind of put on full display as he continues to mature physically, gains strength, and maintains his athleticism. He is a player that can play up and down the defensive line and on the edge. His potential is unlimited. He has the profile and ability to be an early starter and multiple all-conference performer in college. I really shouldn't have to spell it out. That is everything that could possibly transform this Louisville defense. It might be wishful thinking because obviously a high 5-star caliber player is going to help this defense out tremendously. But specifically speaking, for a defense that is just kind of continuing to look to take the next step, and they've improved in certain aspects of the overall defensive side of the ball. But having elite pass rushing is something that it seems like it's just now starting to come around in the Scott Satterfield era. Yaya Diaby and Ashton Gelati, two solid players on the edges. You have Papa Williams, another guy. Some other players throughout the 2022 class, Selah Brown as well. So I think it was interesting the fact that Singletary mentioned that Uiagalelei could also play on the interior as well. And that's a very valuable skill, is that versatility, because if it doesn't for some reason work out as an edge rusher, he has the potential, he has the skill set, has the size to play on the interior, and maybe, following the footsteps of a guy like Jermaine Lole in going from Louisville to the NFL. So obviously a big possibility here. It's huge that the program is getting Matayo on campus, and hopefully, following the visit, we may be able to see him schedule an official for the fall, at some point. So we will continue to monitor that. The next prospect I want to talk about is Leviticus Su'a, a 4-star linebacker from California. We will do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered across the board. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Moving right along, another prospect that will be in attendance at this barbecue that is being hosted this weekend is Leviticus Su'a. He is a 4-star linebacker from Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana, California, a friend of a lot of the current Louisville commits. And that's big to have, having, despite him not being at the same high school as Pierce Clarkson and company, but he's still friends with some of these guys. He told Greg Biggins of 24/7 Sports just recently about the visit. "I can't wait. I'll be there all weekend and looking forward to it. I'll be the only guy from Mater Dei, but I'm close with all those guys, and I know it will be a good time." So Su'a apparently has played with Pierce Clarkson on the 7-on-7 level for quite some time, and that's awesome. He's also friends with Matayo Uiagalelei, and that's huge as well. Visited the program last November on an unofficial, was a big fan of the game day atmosphere. He had this to say about his decision. "I still want to take my time with my decision and take a few more official visits this fall. I want to watch the teams play and get a better look at their program moving forward." Biggins went on to say, "He's a player we've been watching since he was just a freshman, and he has always stood out in just about every setting we've seen him in. He's a very instinctive player, hits like a truck, plays with a nonstop motor, and can play in space, cover, and make plays outside his area." Leviticus Su'a is a player that I think that, let me just start out by saying this. When you look at where Flyville 23 is currently as a class in terms of the positions of need, I think linebacker is one of those that is a solid need. Yes, there are some, young, talented players that are kind of waiting for their opportunities. But after this season, you're losing Monty Montgomery. You are losing Yasir Abdullah. You could be losing a guy like Marvin Dallas. There's a lot of guys in this mix that you could end up losing to the NFL or to graduation or to both, depending on where their college eligibility stands in terms of remaining years left. But overall, there's a lot of playing time next year, and that you might be replacing 3 of the 4 linebacking starters, or 4 of the 4, depending on who the starters are. So linebacker is a big position of need, and I think Su'a is exactly kind of what the doctor ordered for the University of Louisville. A true middle linebacker, in my opinion. There's no doubt that he might be able to play, maybe at the outside linebacker position, but from his film, it looks like he's more comfortable, in the middle, on the inside, ranked as the 374th best prospect in the class, according to 24/7 Sports, the 31st best linebacker, and the 25th best prospect in the state of California. 6'1.5", 225 pounds, like I mentioned, out of Mater Dei High School. Over the past month, visited Arizona, visited Stanford. Washington is also in the mix. California has offered a lot of West Coast flavor in his recruitment, but he's got some big-time offers. So we're talking about Oregon, Michigan, Miami, Texas, UCLA is also interested. There's a lot of programs that are lining up to really get a good chance to recruit him. Had a solid trip to Oregon, from what it seems like on social media and things of that nature. So needless to say, as is the case with a lot of these highly rated West Coast guys, it's kind of tough to take him out of that region, right? It's hard to take West Coast guys out of the West Coast. There's a lot of programs that are appealing there: Oregon, USC, UCLA, and not to mention, it seems like Arizona has been recruiting well. Washington is up in the Seattle area, so it's going to be an uphill battle. But I think that obviously it's the same case as Matayo in this one. Trying to get an official visit as a result of this weekend. This weekend is one of those instances where you're trying to maybe not lay the groundwork, because I'm sure that the coaching staff has already done that, but try to take that next step in these players' recruitments. And I think that Su'a on the field, obviously there's possible playing time early on, or at least, if it's not as a starter, it's as a, valuable depth, but also, from his talent standpoint, sideline to sideline, does a great job of, getting into the opposing backfield. Like Greg Biggins said, he hits like a truck, very vicious in his pursuit, doesn't miss a lot of tackles. I like the footwork. I like the technique that he shows in terms of getting through to the line of scrimmage. Just an overall, there's a term that, when Jalen Alderman committed, on the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast, I forget who said it, but he's like, he's a heat-seeking missile. And that's kind of like the vibes that I get with Leviticus Su'a. Is a player that, has a lot of size, at 6'1", 225. So he's got a pretty good size for a linebacker. Might, have to add a little bit more weight when it comes to coming into the program. But with the way that Ben Souders has, transformed the Louisville strength and conditioning program, there's no doubt in my mind that that's going to be a huge asset for any player looking to come in and transform their body, which most are going to. Very, very few prospects come into college and are college ready, physically speaking. But being 6'1.5", 225, does a great job covering sideline to sideline. His pursuit is very solid, plays fast, hits very hard, does a great job of reading opposing offenses, does really, really good at getting after the quarterback. Just a guy that could be like a Keith Kelsey, playing a lot of snaps early on, and is just, when you look back on his career, you possibly see a guy that might be playing 3 to 4 years of very, very high production college football. So excited for the possibility Su'a possibly joining the program. It's great to get him on campus and try to maybe get an official visit where you maybe sneak into that top group with some of these West Coast schools. But obviously, it's an uphill battle in this recruitment. Easier said than done. The final recruit that we're going to talk about on this episode of the show is 4-star linebacker Stanquan Clark from the Miami area. We're going to do that here in just a second. Obviously, if you are watching this, you're not going to hear the audio implemented advertisements that you would if you were listening to this on any streaming services. So I do want to point that out. So just stay tuned. But in the final segment of the show, we are going to discuss Stanquan Clark, who from the Miami area, formerly of Killian High School. just announced on earlier yesterday, Anthony Yarrow, the founder of 305sports.net, posted that that Stanquan Clark was transferring to Miami Central. So I thought that was pretty notable to add, although he still is going to be in the 305 area. Stanquan has had a pretty busy summer in terms of recruiting. Has made multiple visits to officials this past month, or actually last month in June. NC State on June 16th and Kentucky on June 20th. Miami is also involved in this recruitment. Auburn as well. The Cardinals have been trying to get involved, as the other schools are. Clark, it seems like there was a couple crystal ball projections that were early on made for Miami, and then they kind of got flipped to NC State. So there's a good chance that this is kind of like a 3-team ACC recruitment, kind of like how Luke Burgess was with Florida State and North Carolina. But Stanquan Clark visited the Cardinals on an unofficial back in, I want to say, it was late May or early June, one of those two. But obviously, it made a very, very resounding effect. He made the visit with his mother. His mother actually told Jody Demling of Cardinal Authority 24/7 Sports site, "We actually really enjoyed the visit." She goes on to say, "They let me know he's a very high priority for them. They really want him in their program. And I had a question because I have been hearing about a lot of red shirts or starting as a true freshman, and they let me know that he is one of high priority. And if he comes in hungry with that dog in him, there is that possibility that he could start as a true freshman. Of course, that's a plus." Goes on to talk about the academics. I love the academic aspect of they have extra tutoring and study sessions. I like how they have a plan. It is very structured. It seems like Clark already kind of has an idea that he wants to take an official visit to Louisville 1 weekend this fall to check out the game day atmosphere. But it doesn't seem like a commitment is going to be imminent for Clark in the summer. And that's probably good news for Louisville. Try to get him on campus for an official visit. It's fresh on the mind, and hopefully at that point, he's close to make a decision. His mom does not rule out the fact that could be a possible list cut coming. But man, these statistics, last year as a junior, 131 tackles, 24 of those for a loss, 4 sacks, 6'2", 215 pounds, kind of plays as somewhat of a linebacker safety hybrid. But 6'2", 215, ranked as the 319th best prospect in the class according to the composite, 319, the 25th best linebacker, 62nd in the state of Florida. Also is a star in the track realm, all-state recognition in that regard. Has a ton of athleticism, has a ton of speed, especially when he plays, in that linebacker role. He kind of reminds me of like a Ben Perry, sort of like fitting in that Isaiah Simmons mold of, not necessarily a linebacker, but also not necessarily a safety. He's a hybrid of both. I like the comp to Isaiah Simmons, and that was the comparison I made with Ben Perry, because he's kind of bigger than a traditional safety, but he's a little bit smaller than a traditional linebacker, but he has both of those skill sets. He does a great job of getting after the quarterback on the line of scrimmage, can line up on the outside and rush after the quarterback, does a good job of just gravitating toward the ball, playing sideline to sideline. Also solid in passing situations, whether it's coverage, reading the quarterback's eyes, downfield, playing in kind of a zone type setting. Versatility is one of those things that when Brian Brown came into being the defensive coordinator at Louisville, that was one of the first things he kind of hammered home. And Isaiah Simmons was a guy that he kind of alluded to as kind of the epitome of versatility, because he can play as a linebacker, he can play as a safety, and that you kind of see that position I think it's the dog position. is what it's technically called in the Louisville defense. Ben Perry is listed as the starter there with Marvin Dallas right behind him. So you could see Stanquan Clark possibly, getting some very early playing time, especially if Marvin Dallas decides to go to the NFL. I'm not necessarily sure how much eligibility he has left. He might have 1 year after this. Regardless, it's he would obviously be a great addition to this program. I think that he's a player that a little bit different than Su'a in the way that he's maybe not necessarily a traditional middle inside linebacker, but he's a guy, kind of like a Ben Perry, and that's huge to have because Ben Perry is very, very talented. And I think that Stanquan's a guy that could come in and also play some big time snaps. So this weekend, getting him back so soon, it seems like there's been rumors that he might be in town for the 502 barbecue. I can't confirm nor deny that. I was hearing some rumors from a couple people, but it might be confirmed. I'm not necessarily sure. But if he does come on campus for the 502 barbecue, that's just obviously getting him on campus twice in 2 months is big, and then locking in that official visit is a big deal as well. So Matayo Uiagalelei, Leviticus Su'a, Stanquan Clark, 3 big-time 2023 prospects that if Louisville can get official visits with, who knows, with the way that they're recruiting, you can't really rule out anything. Uphill battles for all 3, but Louisville is doing their best in these recruitments. So that's going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Check out the Locked On ACC podcast for all your conference news, hosted by Candace Cooper. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here for a second special episode coming up later this afternoon.